Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Juni Echeminia. Juni, say hi, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, guys. So, my name's Chaminya Juni Barani. Whole story to that name, especially the Juni part. But yeah, I'm an actor, voiceover artist. I'm an artist, just 3D modeling. I'm a game developer. I'm a content creator, cat content creator. So, in case you see my cats over here, yeah, you're gonna also see them on social media. They're the cats, the same cats. Um, have I said I'm an athlete, track and field athlete?
Ooh, very cool.
I'm that also. So those are just things I do. But first and foremost, I'm a son of God. Not the son
Ah,
of
very
God, but a son of God. So, yeah.
arguably as we all are, right? Some people deny it, some people don't know it, some people do identify. So I'm with you 100%
Mhm.
on that.
Yeah.
So shall we get started?
Yeah. That's
All right. So the main topic is the comic versus comedian. So I identify the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So, and,
mm,
and a lot of people would argue you start as a comic and you evolve into a comedian, which I definitely would say is the case. So the first question is about the role of persona in comedy. So, how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self?
mm. So I feel like that depends on the situation. So, for example, if you're an actor,
Mhm.
you can put on a show, right? Like you're following a script. So that's not really you because you're acting the part, right? Um, if you're not into acting and stuff like that, if it's just, let's say you're in a crowd or with your friends, then it depends on how you feel, for example. So for example, if you're actually yourself, if you're just being yourself, it's easier to just, if you're comfortable with people, it's easier to actually be yourself, right? You're
Yep.
not putting a show, you're just being yourself because you're comfortable with everyone. But then if you're actually trying to be funny, then you're going to put on a show. You're not going to be yourself. Yeah, so that's how I look at it. Yeah.
So that's part of the question here. It's like a Venn diagram about the crossover when, what is reality? So the second question is, does authenticity matter or is illusion part of the magic?
Mm. Yeah, definitely authenticity matters because it's going to be easier to actually express yourself, right?
Mhm.
Than if you're just using an illusion. It's not so easy. Like you're only going to maintain that for so long, right? So I feel like, but it also depends. So if the illusion is more relatable to other people, then the illusion actually makes sense to use, right? But
Yeah.
then again, even if you're not using an illusion, if you're being authentic, that can also be relatable to people. So it depends on which one's relatable to different people, right? But I feel like it's always better to just be authentic because that's the one that's sustainable over a long period of time. Though you can be
Okay.
authentic and then it's not relatable.
Exactly. It's not relatable because the world is changing very quickly, right? And so
Yeah,
perhaps actually creating the future that will soon be is actually what's relatable, even though it's an illusion. It doesn't yet exist. So I think
yeah.
we're in agreement with that. All right. Second question: punching up versus punching down. Where do comics versus comedians stand on this? So let's put it in let's put it in some historical context in a hypothetical. Did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
Hmm. When you say killing, do you mean in like a literal sense? Like, murder, or do you mean like in a joking kind of sense?
Ah, so there it is, right? So what we don't even know if this actually happened, right, in history. But as a hypothetical, perhaps it would be a great scene, a skit to play out. What does it even mean, right? What is this situation even relevant? So if we put it in more context, I could ask, is the audience's agreement with the comedian a form of permission or alignment?
Mhm. Hmm. I feel like I need permission, first of all, to step into the room, to start joking, right?
Yeah.
But then, but then, whenever I start joking and it's relatable to you, then we're going to be in alignment. So it's kind of both. I need permission for me to be aligned to you. That makes
Yeah, I
sense.
know these are very difficult. They're supposed to be difficult questions, right? They make you think like what is really going on here? Yeah, I mean, really it's both, but the question is the nuance. How much of it is this versus that? And where's the
Oh, okay. Wait. Let me see. That's a tough
just like did the prince really kill the jester or is it metaphorical?
one. I feel like more of it's alignment then.
Okay. Yeah.
Because if I, okay, let's say I start joking. Okay, can you just ask that question again?
It's more about the idea of the comic versus comedian. So
Yeah.
is the audience's agreement with the comedian a form of permission or alignment?
Mm. I feel like it's more of alignment. Yeah.
Sure.
Because if you start joking and then I start laughing, that shows that I agree with you, right? So it's more of alignment. So let's say you actually make a joke that's kind of like condescending, right?
Hmm.
But either way, I laugh because it's funny. That doesn't mean that I've given you permission to insult me. It's just that I found it funny. So we're actually in alignment because your joke is funny, right? But then it didn't give you really like permission to,
Yeah.
step on my toes or anything. I didn't really give you that space to come into me like that. But I just laughed because it was funny. So we were just in alignment. That's how I look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I could see it that way as well. I mean, if we want to make an extreme example, you could see the prince came in and killed the jester and said, "Now I'm the jester," and someone's going to laugh at that. They're like, "Whoa!" The king will be like,
Yeah.
"Did you just take his job?" All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
next question is cultural translation of comedy. How do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
Mm. Hmm. I mean, this reminds me of something I heard way back. So there was so we have a comedian in
Mhm.
my country, and then I heard that he went to a different country, and the same jokes, like he was almost arrested for
Yeah.
telling the same jokes in a different country. Um, so
Are
you're
they
asking how they actually bomb in another country?
Yeah, was that like a political joke, for example?
No, so in Kenya, he was actually, you can do anything in the streets, for example, in terms of jokes, and then
Okay.
people are gonna crowd around you, and then you're
Right.
gonna continue making those jokes, and then it's gonna be funny. So he was pretending to be, it was actually a guy who's pretending to be a lady who's pregnant.
Ah.
So that joke was funny in Kenya, where I am. When he tried that, I don't know where he tried it. Was it in London or I don't know, but that was a long time ago. So when he tried the same thing there, man, like the cops came and then they're asking that guy, "What the hell are you doing?" So, anyway,
No, I
so
could definitely
basically,
see that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
mm.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of street performing? Is that kind of the comedy scene where you're at, or is there more of a structured like in a comedy club or nightclub or some other?
Both happen. Yeah.
So
So,
so are comics more universal while comedians are more culturally specific?
Mm,
Let's put it in context. So the guy pretending to be pregnant, I mean,
yeah,
arguably he was a comic, right? Because he's putting on, he looks like, partially at
yeah,
least, looks like a woman because he put
yeah.
something in his stomach, right, to look pregnant, right? I assume.
Hmm.
So I would argue that's a comic at that point, but maybe he actually has a character inside of that. So really,
Mm,
that's the question: was that more universal? And maybe if you were a comedian more culturally specific, but he did go to another
mm.
country and tried it and failed, so
Yeah.
perhaps it wasn't as universal. But you tell me, how would you see that?
Oh, I see, I see. Yeah, yeah. I feel like comics are more universal because they're kind of like actors, right? You can fit into any space. But then a comedian, you're more like you're just being who you are, right? So, and who you are is usually influenced by culture. So you're gonna be more funny in a specific cultural setting where you're actually raised, bred. So I feel like, yeah, I feel like comedians are more cultural specific, and then the comics are more universal.
So would it perhaps be the case that the specificity of a comedian, like where they're from, is actually funnier if they go somewhere they're not from because they look out of place, even though they're being authentic? And it's like funny because they're like, well, they're definitely different, right?
Mm.
That's one way of looking at it. I was just seeing if you would see the same way or not. Is it the same?
Hmm. Yeah. Now again, it depends on where you go. So
Right.
you might be funny in your, specific cultural setting, right? And
Mhm.
then you go to a place like that guy, and then it's not funny. But then you go to a different place, which is not that second place, and then people in that different culture find it funny. So I feel like it depends on the different places have different senses of humor, I guess. So I
And
guess it just depends on the place.
it does.
Yeah,
And this is
because
only one part of comedy. There's like 20 different things you have to do at the same time to be funny.
yeah.
And just addressing one of them being like the location where you're at. That's just one part of it, right? There's so many
Mm,
more things you got to
yeah.
do. All right, crowd work versus crafted work. So, if comics riff like influencers and comedians perform like in reaction videos, where's the sweet spot?
So wait, if
So I would argue that comics riff, like
comedians.
they're doing crowd work, they're interacting more with the audience, and then
Mhm.
comedians perform more memorized material, more of their personality. So the question is
Mm.
where's the sweet spot?
Oh, I see. Hmm. I feel like so if you memorize stuff and then go out into a crowd, and then in the crowd someone says something that kind of like interrupts the flow of what you've memorized,
Hmm.
are you now gonna not listen to them because you've memorized your own things? No, I mean, you're gonna have to listen to them, and then you can actually make a joke from what the people in the crowd said.
Yeah.
Once you make that joke, it's even gonna be funnier. And then you can actually go with the flow. Someone else can make a joke, you can make another joke out of what someone else said, and then you can go with that flow. And then once that ends, now because you have the database of, whatever you memorized, you can go back to that. So it's kind of like you bounce back and forth. And I feel like
Absolutely.
that makes good comedy. So,
So what happens when a comic leans too much into crowd work or when a comedian gets heckled?
mm. So when you lean too much into crowd work, I actually know a guy. He's a comedian. I don't know if you know him. On the socials on Instagram. He actually like that's his comedy style. He just
Hmm.
talks to the audience. That's where he gets his jokes from. Um,
Right.
yeah, if you lean too much on that, what's gonna happen if you do that? I mean, he's a really good comedian. I'm trying to think about him also.
So is he a comic or a comedian?
Oh, to me, he's a comedian.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. He's just being himself. Um,
Well, it looks like he's
what's
being
that?
himself.
Oh, I never thought about that, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Uh-huh. If you lean too much, I'm trying to think fast. Okay. First thing off the top of my head that I can think of, if you lean too much on them, then you really don't have your own jokes, I guess. What if the crowd that day decides to become quiet?
Hmm.
Like nobody in the room is really in a good mood, and then you're trying to rely on people.
Yeah,
That's
I
gonna
mean,
be
good
tough.
mood. It is tough. Definitely. That's when you have to make them angry because angry is easy and not an emotion. And you can kind of, it's not a good way to go, but it is what a lot of people do. So that way you get your
Mm,
energy level up, even though, and then try and shift it to a more positive. So that's a lot
yeah,
of what comedians do to, in that situation. So it's a tough one. Okay.
yeah, that's
Next
a tough one.
question. Advertising and self promotion. Who advertises themselves more, the comic or comedian? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast to get the message out today. See you soon.
Mhm. I feel like the comic advertises more because you're kind of following a script. Like you kind of
Mm-hmm.
like structured. You're a business, sort of. You have that business mind. But for the comedian, they're just like I said, just speaking, being themselves, authentic. I feel like it's whatever they say is just gonna market itself. They don't need to, they're not trying to do something, they're just being. Get? So yeah, I feel like self-promotion goes more for the comic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is self promotion seen as selling out or is it necessary for survival?
I feel like it's to some degree it's necessary because you can't always so I'm also into business and social media and IT and all that stuff and
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like again we have to have a sweet spot. So you can't always rely on sponsored ads, right? You have to let it go viral because it's much easier, first of all, in your pocket. And then also it's if something is actually organic, it goes way faster if it decides to go viral, right? You're gonna it's really hard to get sponsored ads which reach, I don't know, 200 million views. You're gonna really hurt your pocket. But if that happens organically, first of all, you're saving money, and then also it's gonna go way more than the other one. So I feel like you have to balance both. Yeah.
No, I agree with you 100% on that. That's a great way of looking at it. So, censorship and offense. Does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point?
Hmm. Hmm. So like offending different people or offending
Yeah.
myself?
Well, I guess
Hmm.
if you're offended, I don't know. Do you try and offend yourself? Is that part of your internalization process?
No, 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 no. So wait, you said does a comedian offend people? Was that a
Yeah.
question?
So the question do people like the comic, are they trying to avoid offense? Right. And
Mm.
then, and on the flip side, for example, would a comedian court offense to prove a point? Or is it the other way around?
Mm. I see.
There's always four options. It could be both or neither as well. So,
Oh, okay, okay. Huh. So I feel like the comic, so let's say the comic is following a script.
mhm.
Yeah, because they're more structured and they're more in their mind and they're kind of like running it like a business. I feel like they're actually gonna try more to avoid offense. Yeah. And then the comic, no, the comedian, for them, I feel like because they're not really thinking much, they're just being themselves.
Hmm.
I feel they don't care, right? As long as it's funny. So if it offends you and it's funny, like I wasn't even thinking about it. It just happened. So I'm gonna court that offense. It doesn't matter, right?
Sure. Well, then
Yeah.
who survives better in a cancel culture environment?
Hmm. I feel like the comedian, especially in terms of his mental health, like they don't care. They just they're stuck, right? But the other guy, the comic, you know how structured they are. They might overthink things because they're all planning and stuff like that. So when something goes out of the script, yeah, I feel like it's gonna get to them more. So the
Good
other one, the
point. Good point.
comedian survives better than, yeah.
Well put. So, timing and delivery, is it a science or an art? So, do comics rely more on structure and comedians more on rhythm and emotion?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Just so you like you've actually said everything. One's being and the other one's doing. So the comedian, because it's just being, it's gonna be emotion. The other one's gonna be structured, comic. Yeah.
So is it a science or an art?
Comedy.
Yeah.
Huh, huh, huh,
Or
huh.
timing and delivery. Is timing and delivery a science or an
Mhm.
art?
Hmm. I feel like it's an art because I'm an artist, right?
Hmm. Or are
And
you a
art,
scientist?
I'm also a scientist because I'm a game
Ah.
developer. So I'm a computer scientist. So, um, I feel like, okay, it's more of an art because in art, you're actually structuring things. Like, let's say you're developing or you're drawing a cartoon, right? You
Hmm.
have to have those principles of form and structure. Or maybe not a cartoon, that's a bad example. A human person, like you have to have the knowledge of anatomy, right? So that's structure.
Hmm.
Okay, that's structure. But then I also have art, the artistic component to that. So when I'm doing comedy, I'm planning it out. And then when I play with people's emotion, that's art. So it's kind of both. It's both actually. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. There is a sweet spot, so we're always trying to find where that is, right? Okay,
Hmm.
laughter versus applause. So are comics chasing laughs and comedians chasing applause breaks that validate the message?
Hmm. Hmm. So are we taking it as the same thing, like laughter and applause, or laughter?
Versus
And on the
applause,
other
yeah.
side, we have
Yeah, I mean,
both. Yeah.
there's scenarios where they're interchangeable. Have you seen that happen?
Yeah, so this is something I've noticed, by the way. Not just, I don't know if it's not just comedians, even on shows where we have, interviews where actors are being interviewed about different things and then they try to be funny.
Hmm.
I can actually see that they're trying to be funny because they're going to say something when they're asked something or whenever they're just talking. And then they're going to go, after they say something. So it's kind of like they're waiting for people to laugh before they continue what they're saying, right? So I've noticed, yeah, people say a lot. That pause is actually them waiting for people to laugh. So yeah,
So
I've seen that happen
when they use the pause after they say something or before they say something.
after they say something because they've
Huh.
said something and then their intention was for it to be funny, right? Even if it's
Okay.
subconsciously. And
Right.
then they're gonna go, because that is like they're actually waiting for people to laugh.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it actually may inspire laughter at that point because you're saying a joke, da da
Mm.
da da da. Excuse me, are you gonna laugh yet? And everyone's like, oh, I didn't know it was a joke. I'm supposed to laugh now. So it does
Yeah,
happen, right? It does have giving you audience permission to laugh because they're not
yeah.
expecting it, right? But in a comedy scenario, you are expecting it. So
Mm,
comedy as commentary, when does a comedian cross into being a philosopher or a preacher?
mm. That's interesting. I feel whenever you start telling jokes and then all of a sudden you start being, whether it's religious or philosophically deep, and then you cross over into that side, and then you're no longer telling jokes. Now all of a sudden it's starting being, maybe you started off as jokes and then philosophical jokes, and
Hmm.
then all of a sudden it's philosophy is no longer funny. It's now deep. So I guess that's where you actually start becoming a philosophical person instead of a
Yeah.
comedian or comic. Yeah.
So is that good or does it dilute the humor?
Yeah, I feel like it dilutes the humor, actually. It does. Because it's not like so we have people who are philosophical. So you went there as philosophical person, and then you added jokes to your philosophies. That's a whole different thing, right?
Hmm.
So that's good. But then if you went there with the intention of a comedian and then started being philosophical and lost your humor, then that's bad because people are there to actually laugh, right? So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So comedy and vulnerability. I would argue that comics potentially hide behind their jokes and comedians expose themselves. So which
Mm.
one is braver?
Of course, it's much, much braver to express yourself and be vulnerable. That's something. That's much braver than hiding behind your jokes because you're hiding,
But do
right?
you believe that comics are potentially hiding behind their jokes?
Yes, yes. Not all comics, but some comics. Yes, definitely. I've done that myself sometimes.
Sure. For example, when
Yeah,
that guy was pretending to be a pregnant woman, was he hiding behind his jokes?
could have been. I mean, I don't know his
Well,
situation, but
were there jokes or was he just trying to get away with looking like a pregnant woman?
I think it was actually a joke. He was
Yeah.
trying to joke. He was trying to make people laugh in the streets.
But he
Yeah.
wasn't actually telling jokes. It was just the portrayal of a pregnant woman. Is that correct?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. With the goal of making people laugh.
Okay. Okay.
So,
All right.
mhm.
Last question. Legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics Tight Five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
Mhm. So one has to have a cultural standpoint, and then the other one has to be universal. The comic, that is.
I mean, that's how I see it, but you may not be so. Maybe my definitions are all off, right? They don't apply. So that's the point is you tell me, how do you see it? Like the guy trying to be pretending to be pregnant is that I mean, he's not even telling jokes, right? So, which is going to survive? I mean, you're talking about it, it was memorable. So,
Yeah,
was he more of a comedian or a comic?
that was more of a comic. Uh, I feel like the one that's more authentic is gonna survive more. It's gonna stand the test of time because, yeah, like I said, you can only act for so long unless
Mhm.
you're a good actor.
Yeah,
Uh,
that I'm sure has
uh,
a toll on its own if you're constantly being fake, even if you're jumping between different characters. But
yeah,
hey, whatever pays the
yeah,
bills, right?
yeah, yeah. Huh.
So who's going to
That's
survive
interesting.
longer?
The one that's more authentic, I
Sure.
feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then that should be the comedian. All right, Junie. Well,
Mhm.
thank you for being my guest. Where can everybody find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me on Echaminia the actor. on Instagram, on TikTok. That's my acting content. I've started doing monologues there.
Okay.
You can also find me on Echaminia World on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. That's my cat content. It's gonna have so it actually has cats, but I have a game coming up soon, and then I'm also gonna have I'm developing in the process of conceptualizing cat application, mobile app
Uh,
for cat owners. So
Okay.
and then also pet owners. It's gonna evolve into, cat and dog owners. So yeah,
Well, what
basically
does it
those are the
do?
things.
What is the
Uh,
what does this application do?
But it hasn't. It hasn't. It's not even there yet. I have to finish the game first and then the app.
Ah, I
But
see. I
let me
see.
just give you spoilers. So,
Sure.
first of all, I've noticed like whenever people lose pets, they're still using like maybe websites, traditional websites, and then putting out their information there or
Yeah.
putting the information on posters on trees. So
Yeah.
I want to make it more digital and advanced so that, we can have that inside the app and then notify different people if they've seen that. And then also we have AI. So yeah, hopefully you're gonna be able to know what your cat's telling you through the phone. So anyway, not too many
No, I've
spoilers,
seen the
but
experiments. I've seen the experiments about that, especially dogs that they can actually learn English using a
wow.
keyboard. Yeah, they would press their paws on the letters and form words that. Anyway, it's a long story, but
Oh,
all
nice,
right. I
nice.
know, right? That's definitely some
Yeah,
material right there. All right, Juni. Well, thank you
perfect.
so much for being my guest, and for everybody, please like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.